This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
In Arizona, a successful real estate entrepreneur named Chuck Morgan was found shot to death. Some believe this was a contract killing ordered by organized crime. The only significant clue is a cryptic list Morgan scribbled on the back of a $2 bill. 1965. The South was embroiled in the painful civil rights struggle. In rural Louisiana, a young black deputy sheriff was brutally murdered by unknown gunmen. Today, new evidence has surfaced and the case reopened by the FBI. In Tacoma, an unusual and heartwarming story concerning a young epilepsy victim and the dog who saved her life. Does a mysterious sixth sense enable some animals to actually predict epileptic seizures? This is the only photograph of a bold bank robber who has coolly committed a series of successful holdups without ever being identified. Perhaps it will help you put him behind bars. We'll also tell you how you help shed light on the bizarre case of a demented arsonist who set fire to a house and then callously videotaped the blaze. Thanks to our viewers, 2 suspects, both teenagers, are now in custody. Join me once again. You may be able to help solve a mystery. Tucson, Arizona, March 22nd, 1977. Chuck Morgan left as usual to drive 2 of his 4 daughters to school. Riding the crest of Tucson's real estate boom, Morgan had become president of his own escrow agency. From the outside, his life looked ideal. The hard-working businessman, devoted husband and father. But in 1977, Chuck Morgan had become a potential witness in a state land fraud case involving a known organized crime boss. And suddenly, on March 22nd, Morgan disappeared. 3 days later, Chuck Morgan returned home at 2 in the morning.
I was in bed, and the dog started barking. And I got up, and there was a thump against the back door. I went to the door and opened it, and there was Chuck. And he was missing a shoe. He had one plastic handcuff around one ankle, and his hands still had them on.
What happened to you? Mom, what happened to Daddy? Just go back to your rooms. Go back to your rooms.
He kept motioning to his throat because he hadn't said a word.
Can you talk? Can you write?
And he shook his head yes, so I went and got a tablet and pen.
Hallucinogenic?
He wrote that his throat had been tainted with a hallucinogenic drug and that the drug could drive him irrevocably insane or destroy his nervous system and kill him. And he wanted the car moved. He wanted it moved immediately because he said that he didn't want them to know he was home. He wouldn't tell me who they were.
I'm going to call the police.
And I wanted to call a doctor, and I wanted to call the police.
No.
And he was adamant.
But why?
And then he wrote out that that would be signing a death warrant for the entire family.
For 1 week, Ruth Morgan nursed her husband, feeding him water with an eyedropper. Before his voice returned, he began to allude to a secret identity, agent for the federal government.
He wrote, "They took my treasury identification." And that's the first I'd heard of it.
Your treasury ID is missing? What treasury ID?
He wouldn't talk to me about it. He wrote. He had been working for them for about 2 or 3 years. And that was it.
Who is responsible for this bizarre kidnapping episode in Chuck Morgan's life? It is possible that Morgan really was a secret agent, dealing with organized crime so he could pass information along to the government. But Morgan may also, like so many others in Arizona during the 70s, have become caught up himself in the web of organized crime. Lured by the mild climate and a confused and corrupt criminal justice system, the Mafia reportedly established Arizona as a narcotics pipeline and a haven for swindlers and money laundering. Led by former New York Don Joseph Bonanno, more than 500 established racketeers set up shop here during the 70s. Their influence began a slew of gangland-style killings, culminating in the slaying of investigative reporter Don Bowles. What made Arizona particularly attractive to crime syndicates was a unique state law which allowed them to buy up land through numbered blind trust accounts. That way, they themselves could remain anonymous, providing a nearly foolproof way to launder money. Chuck Morgan did real estate escrow work for at least one Mafia family, and they may also have begun using him to do escrow work for purchases of gold bullion and platinum, a more convenient way to launder money.
It is very easy to get in over your head. And I suspect that over the years, Mr. Morgan was in that kind of a situation. He was a straight businessman who probably got a little too close to the flame.
Well, the sales agreement looks all in order. The legal description of the parcel, the amount.
He was around the edges of a couple of fairly large organized crime groups in Arizona at that time.
Ourselves a deal here.
The records begin early '73, and it would indicate he was doing perhaps upwards of $1 billion with a B.
Charles Morgan.
Escrow work in bullion and platinum. Transactions that only existed on paper. There was never any gold, at that level at least. And money changed hands and moved through escrow accounts in Los Angeles and Atlanta banks, and that's how the monies were legitimized.
Chuck mentioned to me once that there was money laundering going on in this town, but nothing that he himself was involved in. He told me the less the girls and I knew, the better off we would be.
After his kidnapping, Chuck Morgan began exhibiting a justifiable paranoia. He wore a bulletproof vest and insisted on driving his daughters to and from school. He informed the school that no one else was authorized to pick the girls up. All his precautions were to no avail. 2 months after his first disappearance, Chuck Morgan vanished again.
The last morning that anybody saw him, he went up to his parents' house, and he was talking to his father and told him that if anything happened to him, there was a letter explaining why, how, and who. The letters never surfaced.
9 days after her husband had disappeared, Ruth Morgan received a mysterious phone call.
Yes.
The caller was a woman who gave Ruth a reference from the Bible.
This woman said, "Ruthie?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Chuck is all right. Ecclesiastes 12, 1 through 8. And then she hung up. And the mourners go,
The passage reads in part,
"Forever the silver
"Men are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road. Remember him before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl is crushed. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it." 2 days after Ruth's cryptic phone message, her husband's body was discovered, his bulletproof vest ironically in place. He had died from a single bullet fired at close range into the back of his head. The bullet came from his own .357 Magnum, which was lying beside him. The investigators also found a piece of paper with directions to the murder site jotted down in Chuck's handwriting, and a pair of sunglasses which definitely did not belong to him. They made one additional discovery. Apparently, Chuck Morgan had clipped a $2 bill inside his underwear. Written on the bill were 7 Spanish names, beginning with the letters A through G. Above them was a notation, Ecclesiastes 12, with the verses 1 through 8 marked by arrows drawn on the bill's serial number. This was the same reference the mysterious female caller had given to Ruth Morgan. On the back of the bill, the signers of the Declaration of Independence were numbered 1 through 7, and a crude map was drawn.
The map is of some roads that do exist between Tucson and the Mexican border, going out to a place called Robles Junction and then going south to a little town called Sasabe. A ranch is identified down there where there are landing strips. It's an area that very likely would be involved in smuggling. And there are some indications that if Mr. Morgan was involved in some movements of real gold, that some of it, in fact, may have been coming across from Mexico in that fashion.
Despite the puzzling evidence, many in the sheriff's department believed Chuck Morgan's death was a suicide. They claimed he had shot himself in the back of the head.
There is no way Chuck would have committed suicide. And if he had even contemplated suicide, he would have left a letter for his girls and for me.
It is not a very normal place to shoot oneself as a suicide. And bear in mind, he's wearing a bulletproof vest at the time. I've never seen in all my years as a journalist a fella take himself out in the desert wearing a bulletproof vest and shoot himself in the back of the head.
I was familiar with the intelligence officers working intelligence for the sheriff's department at the time. I had some conversation with them about this case. They thought it was a homicide and gang-related. They left the sheriff's department. I don't know if they left because of what they detected in this case or another case or a combination of cases, but they indicated they were in fear of their lives and actually left law enforcement. 2 of them left the continental U.S.
2 days after Chuck Morgan's death, an anonymous woman spoke to a member of the Pima County Sheriff's Department on the telephone. She said Chuck had come to meet her at a local motel just before he died. The woman called herself Green Eyes and said she was the same one who had called Chuck's wife, quoting the passage from Ecclesiastes. Green Eyes also said that in the motel, Chuck showed her a briefcase containing thousands of dollars in cash. He claimed the money would buy him out of a gang contract that had been put on his life.
How much do you have in there?
Hopefully $60,000.
Why do you need so much?
If the information that Green Eyes provided is accurate, it is, in a very perverse sense, remotely possible that Mr. Morgan paid for his own murder.
The theory goes that organized crime put the word out that they wanted Chuck Morgan dead. A hitman then told Chuck, who came up with the money to buy the hitman off. But when the 2 of them met in the desert, the hitman killed Chuck anyway, then took his money.
There is a great likelihood that Mr. Morgan was, in fact, doing something with the government. And I think somebody blew his cover, and I think he got killed.
Go over there and kneel down.
I think this was a guy who was extremely naive about a lot of things. The sort of associations he suddenly found himself in, and maybe was even asked to put himself in by people in the U.S. government.
Three weeks after her husband's death, Ruth Morgan had 2 visitors claiming to be government officials.
Jack Richards were special agents for the FBI.
They opened and closed their identification very fast. They said they wanted to come in and look through the house. I never thought at the time to ask them for a search warrant. They never said what they were looking for. To this day, I don't even know what they were looking for.
The 2 men tore Ruth Morgan's house apart, searching for something which they seemed unable to find. Because she was so rattled, Ruth did not take down their names. No one knows for sure if the 2 men really were from the FBI. Don Devereaux contacted the Bureau to get more information on the Morgan case.
When I made a formal Freedom of Information Act request to the FBI, they'd never heard of Mr. Morgan. Despite the fact that they obviously opened an investigation, despite the fact the FBI interviewed Mr. Morgan's attorney, they were all over this thing like a blanket for a while. But now they've never heard of the guy. He never existed. No card, no file, no nothing.
Was Chuck Morgan doing undercover work for the government? Or the clues he left behind on the $2 bill an attempt to pass coded messages to the FBI? 12 years later, Ruth Morgan is still trying to unravel the strange clues left by her husband. The passage from Ecclesiastes haunts her.
While the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble. I don't know what it means. There's a message there somewhere. I know there is, but I don't know what it means.
I think the $2 bill provides the basis for some kind of cryptography. I think there are the bases of some kind of a code there. What seems to be missing, however, is the document that the $2 bill would unlock. I think we need a companion piece to really make ultimate sense out of the $2 bill.
Is there a document that explains the mysterious death of Chuck Morgan, tying all the cryptic clues together? Were the two men calling themselves federal agents searching for the document when they ransacked the Morgan home? For Ruth Morgan, only one thing is certain.
He was murdered. Somebody held a gun to his head and killed him. I don't know why. I may never know why. And I probably will never know who. But I know somebody did it.
He was the husband of someone. He was the father of 4 children. Was he a good guy? Was he a bad guy? If he was quietly providing assistance to the U.S. government in monitoring the activities of one or more major organized crime families, he wasn't a villain. He was a good guy. And they need to know that.
When the segment aired, we received hundreds of calls relating to Morgan's death. According to Devereaux, who continued his investigation, many turned out to be productive leads. 3 months later, a draftsman at a Phoenix computer company, Doug Johnston, was found dead in his car outside his office. Johnston had been shot once behind the ear, and police have suggested it was a possible suicide. Curiously, Johnston worked across the street from Don Devereaux's office and drove a car that almost exactly matched Devereaux's. In fact, Devereaux is now convinced that the bullet which killed Doug Johnston was intended for him.
I got a phone call from a journalist friend of mine from Washington, D.C., who had been briefed by a high-level CIA official that, in fact, that was a botched hit, that some people thought they were hitting me when they shot the guy across the street. And, in fact, there was still a contract outstanding, and it was coming around again, that whatever I had done was still a problem to someone.
2 other sources in the intelligence community have confirmed to Don Devereaux that he is a target for murder, and that the next attempt will be made to look like an accident. We'll bring you a full report on this intriguing case in the near future. Recently, we profiled a story that generated more than 1,600 phone calls from our viewers. The case involved a fire that was apparently started by an arsonist, then recorded on videotape by the suspect.
This is what I've been doing on week's vacation.
This footage is from the actual videotape found on August 15, 1989 by a Stockton, California family.
I've never run across anything as eerie as this tape. It frightened me. As a matter of fact, I thought about it that night when I went to bed.
Despite a frame-by-frame analysis of the video, investigators were unable to match the fire recorded on the tape with any suspected arson fires reported in the state of California. The burning structure appeared to be a wood frame house, perhaps in a rural area. Because fire engines do arrive, investigators felt certain that somewhere a report of the blaze was on file.
I think the person who made this videotape and is responsible for the fire will, without a doubt in my mind, continue to set fires. And the person needs to be apprehended and stopped before his fires become more destructive.
Update: Redwood City, California, 60 miles west of Stockton. Within minutes of our broadcast, several viewers from Redwood City called our telecenter and identified the location of the house seen burning on the videotape.
As we were sitting here and we looked at the film on the TV, we realized with utter shock that it was the house behind us that was on TV. And our family was scared, to say the least, because we didn't realize that the film even existed. And it was no mistake in my mind at all that that was the house that was behind us by watching the videotape on TV. And we called in to Unsolved Mysteries and gave all the information.
The arson occurred on August 15th, 1988. The house that was destroyed was under construction at the time. Today it has been rebuilt. Incredibly, on the night of the blaze, Woodside Fire Captain Don Dellinges also videotaped the fire.
While I was setting up the command post, directing companies in to extinguish the fire, I had set up my video camera to film the fire for training and investigation purposes.
By comparing Captain Dellinges' tape with a video shot by the arsonist, investigators were able to confirm beyond a doubt the fire's location.
Some of the calls received led us to a 17-year-old Woodside youth. We interviewed that youth. Through that interview, it led us to a 19-year-old Redwood City youth. He was arrested and interviewed and subsequently admitted burning the house, taking the video, and was the one who talked on the videotape.
Our biggest hope was that maybe we would find an area or location of the fire. We never dreamed that we'd get the results that we did.
One of the two suspects is currently awaiting trial on charges of arson. Investigators believe that between them, the two suspects may also be responsible for as many as 25 arson fires in the Redwood City area over the past 3 years. In the early 1960s, the American South was at a crossroads. Selma, Birmingham, and Greensboro were just a few of the battlegrounds where the desire for racial equality became a demand. With segregation starting to crumble, blacks and whites faced off in tense, often violent confrontations. In Washington Parish, Louisiana, the black community began to push for integration of the sheriff's department. In response, 2 black deputies were appointed. On June 1st, 1964, 46-year-old David Creed Rogers and 34-year-old O'Neill Moore became the first black law enforcement officers in Washington Parish.
It was just a great day, knowing my husband was the first Negro deputy. He got in his car and he turned his radio on and reported in, and we were just tickled.
At that time, feelings were running very high, very high. And people, some people, not all people, was against the blacks taking a part in any part of law enforcement or anything.
A year later, Deputy Sheriff O'Neill Moore was gunned down while on duty in a racially motivated attack. On June 6, 1965, Moore was laid to rest, an unheralded martyr of the civil rights struggle. His killer was never identified. Moore's partner, Creed Rogers, lost an eye in the attack, but survived.
I would like to know who did it, for my sakes and everybody else, to know who the neighbors are. I know I wouldn't want to live next door to anybody, black or white, whatever, was dirty enough to do something like that.
Today, Southerners are justifiably proud of the enormous strides made by both blacks and whites in putting the past behind them. But 25 years ago, times were different. Black deputies such as O'Neill Moore and Creed Rogers were not allowed to confront whites, much less arrest them. But despite the fact that they were working in a white world that barely tolerated their presence, O'Neill and Creed persevered. They promised themselves that they would not let their community down. It was a night of June 2nd, 1965. After a year on duty, O'Neill and Creed had come to expect harassment, so they were not surprised when a pickup truck began to tailgate them.
It ain't so bad at night, because you get the whole gut, you wake up in the morning.
We got on Peters Hill, about 2 miles north of Ornador. We saw a fire on the left of the road. So we made a U-turn to inspect the fire. It was wooded area, see if there was fire getting out.
What do you think? Hell, it ain't nothing but old trash fire. Come on.
We checked the fire and saw it was just a trash fire. It wasn't no danger. So we made a U-turn and proceeded on south. And this truck had pulled over to the right. And as we passed them, the truck pulled out and began to follow us. It was, appeared to be a dark truck, black. I noticed it had a white grill and a rebel tag on the front. So as we headed south, it continued to follow. The car hit the tree, and they passed still shooting, and evidently the last shot got him. It knocked him over on me.
You guys all right?
Hearing the shots, a local resident ran to the accident scene.
My wife called the police.
He found O'Neill Moore dead and Creed Rogers badly injured. He stood guard until police arrived. Chief Deputy Sheriff Doyle Holliday arrived a few minutes later. He began an investigation that would consume the next several months.
When I got up there, I found Deputy O'Neill Moore dead, and Deputy Creed Rogers all shot up.
What's that? What? A black truck.
Creed, he described the truck.
Did you recognize it?
Right down to the last detail.
You're gonna be okay. It's all right.
And I immediately put out an APB on that truck. In less than about 30 or 45 minutes, they called me from my office and told me that they had apprehended a truck of that description in Tylertown, Mississippi. The truck fit the description to a T of what Creed had told me, with the exceptions of the side rails. There were no side rails on the truck at the time of apprehension.
The truck was stopped just 20 miles from the scene of the shooting. The driver was arrested, but was soon released on a $25,000 bond. The charges were later dismissed due to lack of evidence. Suspicion naturally focused on the Ku Klux Klan, but the local chapter immediately denied any involvement. Racial tensions increased. In Washington Parish, the sheriff refused to give in to the pressure. O'Neill Moore was replaced by another black deputy.
They really didn't accomplish anything, because when they was trying to get rid of Creed and O'Neill, it didn't frighten them. They just give others more get up and go about them. It really gave them more courage.
They wasn't going to get the black deputies off of the sheriff's department, because it wasn't any time after that until the sheriff called me one day and told me to go and hire another one.
Well, we can't get on it before first thing in the morning.
Doyle Holliday continued to pursue his investigation. 2 weeks after the shooting, the violence came to his home.
After I got through talking to the sheriff, I went over and sat down on the couch. That's when the shot rang. And I hollered, "Get down," and I grabbed my gun that was laying on the table and went out the door, fired. And they immediately took off. Might have been stepping on somebody's toes, I don't know. But I don't know why they picked me out, singled me out, because even had they backed me down, which they didn't, they still had the FBI and the state police to contend with.
The local population refused to cooperate with the FBI or local authorities, despite a $25,000 reward from the governor of Louisiana. The case was deemed inactive in 1967.
25 years ago, the Klan was so strong that the people would not open their mouth. They would not give you a lead on anything for fear of their house being burnt or some member of their family being hurt or something to that effect. Back then, they didn't want anything to do with the FBI, the state police, or the local police.
In June of 1987, the FBI field office in New Orleans was contacted by one informant and received letters from 2 other anonymous sources. They claimed to identify the people responsible for O'Neill Moore's murder. As a result of this new information, the case was reopened.
One of the 2 letters is very specific on identifying individuals that were within the pickup truck and the getaway route of the pickup truck involved. We have looked at the 3 individuals specifically mentioned in this anonymous letter, have interviewed their families or anyone that may be associated with these 3 individuals.
Let me write this down now. What did you say?
The FBI does not currently have enough information to make any arrests. However, they do believe that the killers belong to the Klan.
That's what's happening. We feel that it was members of the Ku Klux Klan that took part in this shooting, but they did it on their own. They didn't allow other individuals to have knowledge of what they were going to do.
It has been 25 years since O'Neill Moore and his partner took their last ride together. Creed Rogers refused to be frightened away from his chosen career, and in 1988 he retired as a full captain from the Washington Parish Sheriff's Department.
I still wonder who could have done it. That'll be with me forever. Who could have done that? You know, it's when people try to kill you and you hadn't did anything to them, why, that never leaves your mind. Sometimes you wonder they're still out there, still wanting to try it. It's a bad feeling.
I think that a lot of people that was involved back then are getting on up in years like myself, and they don't want to go face the Almighty with that on their conscience. And I think before the final day, somebody's going to get it off of their chest.
The death of O'Neill Moore was a crime against every American. That his killers are still at large after 25 years is a further affront. Their capture will not ease the pain felt by O'Neill's family and friends, but it will certainly prove that while justice may not always be blind, it does have a long memory. When we return, the story of a remarkable dog who helped save the life of an epilepsy victim by predicting her seizures. Our next story is a unique and heartwarming mystery. It deals with a bond between people and animals and the amazing sixth sense some animals possess when it comes to helping and protecting their owners. Minneapolis, Minnesota, December 4th, 1984, 2 a.m. 15 minutes earlier, a drunk driver had run a red light and collided with a car driven by 19-year-old Victoria Doroshenko. Victoria was left unconscious and suffering from multiple head injuries.
Before the accident, I had a perfect life for a teenager. After the accident, I lost everything. I couldn't go back to school. I lost my job. I was in and out of the hospital so many times that there was no way that I could even function with a normal life. I felt really lost. I felt like somebody had taken away my life for what life I had after the accident.
Victoria was plagued by headaches and periodic blackouts. A year and a half later, she moved to Tacoma, Washington, hoping to put the accident and her injuries behind her. Then in August of 1986, while she was already hospitalized, Victoria suffered a violent seizure. The symptoms were clear. Victoria had epilepsy.
Is she breathing? Yeah, let's get her on her side. Oxygen?
In her automobile accident, brain cells had been damaged, disrupting normal activity and causing seizures. For Victoria, the prognosis was grim.
When my seizures were at their worst, I was having up to 24 a day, big ones, and in between the big ones, I was having about 10 little ones. The doctors didn't think that I was going to live very much longer.
The severity of Victoria's seizures left her completely incapacitated. She fell often, re-injuring her head, which only induced more seizures. She was confined to a wheelchair and required round-the-clock care. Because Victoria's lungs filled with fluid during and after the seizures, death was a constant threat. Her situation seemed hopeless.
You take care of yourself now.
I couldn't do anything. I couldn't leave the house. When I did leave the house, I had to have enough people around me that could pick me up or carry me if need be or whatever. If I was having a seizure, I had to be strapped in to somewhere because the seizures were so violent that I would throw myself around and injure myself. I wasn't awake most of the time. When I was awake, I was really depressed. I didn't really want to live.
Victoria would find help in an unlikely place. The Purdy Correctional Center for Women, a prison 25 miles outside Tacoma. There, the state of Washington has set up a special program. Under the guidance of a professional, the inmates train dogs rescued from the pound as companions and aids for the handicapped. The dogs learn to open and close doors, pick up a telephone receiver, pull wheelchairs, fetch things like clothing and hairbrushes. In 1987, Victoria heard about the program and went to the prison. It was a decision that would save her life.
Hi, Vicki. This is Chase.
I was hoping for a dog that could help me in my daily living skills. And I was real lonely. I didn't have a life. I didn't have a social life, so I thought maybe that a dog would help.
Get to know him a little better?
When Victoria arrived for her interview, inmate trainers were working in the room with two dogs, both golden retrievers. One of the dogs had been chosen for Victoria.
That day, when I was out at the program, I ended up having a major seizure.
Sherry!
And the dog that they were originally training for me just walked away from me and didn't care.
The second dog in the room, whose name was Harley, defied his trainer's commands and did respond.
When Vicki started seizuring and Harley went to her and laid down with her, everybody in the room was astounded. The dog was doing what we'd hoped he could learn to do before we ever hoped he could learn to do it. He somehow knew.
When I woke up from my seizure, I woke up and his head was laying on me and he was looking at me like all sad and he knew something was wrong. As soon as I started petting him, I think he realized that everything was okay. He started wagging his tail, and it was from there on, I knew that that was my dog, and I knew it was gonna work. He was my partner from then on.
No one could explain why Harley responded to Victoria during her seizure. The prison program had discovered another dog which showed a special sensitivity to epileptics. Again, with no explanation. Why do certain animals appear to establish this immediate sympathetic bond? For the medical community, this question is an intriguing one. For Victoria Doroshenko, it was a question of life and death. Once Harley was with Victoria full-time, her anxiety diminished and the frequency of her seizures decreased dramatically. Victoria's doctors allowed her to resume classes at a local community college. Harley was Victoria's constant companion.
I was at Tacoma Community College, and I was walking across campus, and he all of a sudden started acting real funny. He didn't want to cooperate. He didn't want to listen to me.
What is it, boy? What is it, boy? Calm down. Calm down. Come on. Shh, calm down. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. Come on.
Harley was a real laid-back dog. He wasn't rambunctious like that, or rambunctious. So when he started acting that way, I really didn't know what was happening.
Excuse me, can I sit down here?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I'm not feeling so well.
Can I do something for you?
No, I just want to sit here for a while.
Harley calmed down once Victoria was safely inside a classroom. 5 minutes later, she had a major seizure. Amazingly, it appeared to Victoria and to others present that Harley had somehow known Victoria was going to have a seizure. His barking and strange behavior had been a signal for her to go to a safe place.
When I realized Harley could predict my seizures ahead of time, I was so thrilled. I knew that I was saved. It changed my life completely.
After his first prediction, Harley never failed to warn Victoria when a seizure was coming on. He always exhibited the same aberrant behavior, giving Victoria 15 to 45 minutes notice before a seizure was about to strike.
So after that, the bond and the trust and the love and the dependency grew and grew and grew until there was no comparing it. We were each other. We became like one, a shadow.
Harley changed Victoria's life dramatically. She now felt comfortable enough to leave her house whenever she wanted. She began to interact with other people again. If she had a seizure, Harley always stayed by her side. He sensed danger and kept her away from traffic if a seizure was coming on. For the first time since her accident, Victoria enjoyed the comfort and security of a normal life.
Modern technology and physicians, doctors, and none of us can predict when a seizure will occur or how many seizures a person will have. These dogs can. They can tell beforehand when a seizure will occur. They can warn the person, which is an incredible phenomena, so that the person can feel safe, they can be safe, they can have the comfort of having a dog with them at all times. Because the anxiety of having a seizure is with someone all the time.
I can never repay him or show the devotion I have for him from what he's done for me.
In June of 1990, Harley became ill. Veterinarians could do nothing, and in July, Harley died.
There's no words to describe how I felt about Harley. He gave me a life, and a life is more than you could ever give anybody.
The Epilepsy Institute has received reports of 15 other dogs who seem to be able to predict epileptic seizures. 6 of these animals came from the Purdy Correctional Center for Women. No one can explain why certain dogs seem to have an innate sensitivity to epileptics. For the victims of epilepsy whose quality of life is so greatly improved by these dogs, no explanation is necessary. They are happy to accept this particular unsolved mystery at face value. Next, the story of a crook who pulled off a series of daring bank robberies. Finally, he has been captured on film. On September 19, 1987, a well-dressed man entered a Spokane, Washington bank.
May I help you?
Stand up and move away from the desk, quickly. Come on, move over. To the counter. Both of you, back away from the counter. Quickly! Don't touch any alarms. Do exactly as you're told. You! Get over here with the others. No tricks. No fast moves.
The robber was calm, in control, seemingly prepared for any eventuality.
Take them out slowly.
He even showed the terrified bank employees a police scanner, claiming that he would know if they managed to alert the law.
I'll know about it. Move!
The robber ignored the easy money sitting in the teller's drawers. Instead, he ordered everyone into the vault.
Hurry it up.
In his first robbery, he stole more than $100,000.
Hurry up!
It was over in less than 5 minutes. The robber left no fingerprints behind, and even managed to avoid being photographed.
The reason for that is the way he very quickly got control of the situation prevented any photographs from being obtained. Between this first bank robbery in September of 1987 and the present, he has robbed 4 more banks here in Spokane, using very similar method.
On August 30th, 1988, the bandit stole $14,000 from another Spokane bank and received an unexpected bonus.
A die pack was given to the robber, which went off very shortly after he left the bank, within seconds of him leaving the bank. Obviously, that caused a commotion on the street, and a witness did observe that commotion, and as a result of that, saw him get into a vehicle and make his escape.
After another robbery in November of 1988, bank employees were able to help create composites of the bandit. But these sketches were no substitute for photographs. Amazingly, he had still managed to avoid the omnipresent bank cameras. But on June 6, 1989, when he paid a visit to Spokane's Horizon Federal Credit Union, his luck changed. This time, frightened but resourceful bank tellers stood up to threats.
We said hi, and he said hi, and he walked up to the counter and pulled out his gun and put on sunglasses at the same time, and then told us that he wanted to go into the vault and get the money. He had one of the girls hold the bag while I got the money out, put the money in the bag, and he told us to empty out the teller drawers. He went to one drawer at a time, and when we were emptying them out, that we, pulled all the money out, and there's a bill trap underneath, some of the bills, and we pulled the money out from underneath the bill trap, which triggered the alarm.
Not only was a silent alarm activated, but the bank's surveillance camera was also triggered. For the first time, a robber was captured on film.
I was really scared when I pulled the bill trap. I thought, if this guy knew that I pulled it, I'm in trouble. And I just knew that I had to do it, though. It was nothing else I could do.
Getting a photo in this robbery was a big step forward for us in our investigation. Up till this point, all we had were witness descriptions of the bank robber. Now we have an actual photograph, and a very good photograph, to work with to help us identify him. It did result in us linking him to 3 additional bank robberies as a suspect in Tucson, Arizona. So that was, again, a major step forward in determining the scope of what he's been doing, as well as an aid to identification.
The robber appears to be between 35 and 45, 6 feet to 6 feet 2 inches tall, and weighs between 200 and 220 pounds. He seems tanned and healthy, and the FBI believes he may live in the Southwest, commuting to banks in the Pacific Northwest. In order to protect their employees, the Horizon Federal Credit Union has transferred those involved in the holdup to new locations and have redesigned their internal security. Meanwhile, the robber has been busy. Since 1987, the elusive robber has allegedly held up at least 9 banks, 6 in the Pacific Northwest and 3 in the Southwest. His last known heist was in April of 1990. Unbeknownst to him, this time he was captured on videotape. These are still frames taken from the videotape. At 10:30 a.m., a bandit strolled into a Tacoma, Washington bank and walked out with a substantial amount of cash. Next week on Unsolved Mysteries, the tragic story of Norman Ladner, a 17-year-old Mississippi boy who died from a gunshot wound to the head. The police say suicide. The parents say murder. In Santa Fe, New Mexico, the legend of a miraculous staircase built in a tiny chapel by a mysterious and unknown carpenter. For over a century, visitors have been dazzled by his handiwork and baffled by his identity. In Oklahoma, a brutal murder took the life of truck driver Dwayne McCorkindale. Perhaps you can help identify his killers. For every mystery, there is someone, somewhere, who knows the truth. Perhaps that someone is watching. Perhaps it's you.